welcome back to my channel. Um, Today's video is about breakdancing, moshing, and martial arts, and how they all connect as a form of resistance, both politically, against violence and terrorism done by the state and by the government, and of course, by cops. In order to understand the connection between the two, first, I should probably explain who I am. I'm Frankenstein. I make YouTube videos, basically just about anything that I find interesting at the time. And I kind of feel like making YouTube videos is the next wave, so fuck it, right? I shouldn't have sworn. First minute, whatever, it doesn't matter. Anyway, here we are. Walk with me here, okay? Here we are, in the Bronx, New York, where African Americans and Puerto Ricans live in unison. Together, they create this call and response that kind of makes it for a healthy form of competitiveness and rivalry that was much needed as a form of rest against being in a low-income area, rampant with drug issues and poor infrastructure due to Ronald Reagan being in power at the time. This is the 1980s, so Reaganomics and the crack epidemic was rife throughout this area. But for a little bit of time, they had a moment of reprieve where they could release their inhibitions from even the gang tensions and in turn, the poor management of the state and capitalist ruling class. This was a time where they could relax, a time where they could both relax and train to be stronger the next time they did protest against the powers that be. This is what makes rest, or in this case, breakdancing, a form of resistance. So, if that can be considered a form of resistance, where does the link come in moshing? Well, moshing was an art form that has had very watery origins, from people thinking that it came from pogoing, which started by Sid Vicious in 1976. Vicious told Sex Pistols chronicler Julian Temple that he'd invented the dance as a way to attack non-punks who came to punk shows, which, I mean, is valid in its own sense, but the word moshing actually originated from Bad Brains, a black or Afrocentric band who originated the term mash from a mispronunciation of the word mash. And they said it and the crowd thought they were saying mosh. So you can see how the Afrocentric beginnings link back to breakdancing and link into moshing. These ideas of call and response and healthy rivalry and community, all these ideas that are inherently Afrocentric, coming together in this moment of moshing and punk in general, right? Punk originated as a way of rejecting conformity and etiquette, of discarding the capitalistic sheen of contemporary rock and pop for a more visceral, raw experience. Hence, the rejection of what normal concert behavior was supposed to be. But these all coincide with the ideas of anti-establishment and becoming your own person, and sometimes even the ideas of anarchy. This release of inhibitions from capitalism being spread throughout Britain, London, and America too. This was a time of rest, a time where hitting each other and building tolerance to hitting someone and getting hit, that form of rest became a form of resistance because it helped in protest knowing when and when not to throw a punch. Anarchy or anti-establishment was a prominent force in the creation of moshing. It was a way to be different, to not conform to civility or civilization, to be human for a little bit. No matter what situation you're in, no matter what your income's looking like, you can go to the pit and mosh and be happy. And there's community within the pit. You can never go to a pit and get really hurt. Because if somebody did get really hurt, everyone would work to help that person. And that's the beauty of moshing. It is a form of rest, but it's also a form of political resistance. Now, the connection to martial arts, I want to use capoeira as an example. Walk with me again through the slums of Brazil, or quilombos or slave camps in the height of colonialism, where slavery was the norm and black slaves rarely had time to rest. These quilombos or slave camps that were made by slave members who escaped and decided to make their own society were anarchist in nature, without rulers or hierarchy, but instead a community working to protect each other and working to aid each other. Dancing to release inhibitions is common throughout moshing, throughout breakdancing, and it's also how capoeira started. Capoeira is now known as a Brazilian martial art, but if you do capoeira, you understand that it's more than that. It's a form of play. It's a dance. It's an expression of the self, almost. So, when dancing in this fashion, where you also practice where to place your kicks and where to place your fists, it's a form of practicing self-defense, deceptively so. And with it comes rest, because there's no real harm. Rather, it's a form of enjoyment. It's a thing you can do to gain enjoyment with a group of people, especially a group of people who so desperately needed it to keep going, to stay motivated. That in itself is a form of resistance. There's something common in capoeira known as the call and response in the form of chamada, which is similar to how in punk shows they help anyone who falls down. This chamada was a passive time where two members would hold hands in the middle of the roda and staying vigilant of the other person before anything they could do to inflict harm upon you could happen. Being able to react to whenever a trick or some form of deception was being played. This was training. But it was fun. It was relaxing. It was enjoyable. It was play. It was a game. And that's why it resembles a dance. Not purely because they wanted to hide it from their oppressors, but because they needed an escape. And that's what all of these things are. An escape from the current reality that you live in. But this escape isn't only just escaping from reality and forgetting a little bit about what time it is. That in itself, rest in itself, is not politically resistant. But when you rest in a way that prepares you for the next time that you would protest, the next time that you would act out against the government or state, act out against police, act out against people in your community even who are a detriment to the community as a whole, this was a form of resistance. That's why rest is a form of political resistance. And of course, differently abled folks also use rest as a form of resistance, because they may not be able to move around as much, but even in the time where they rest inside their home, they still make an effort through online means, through social media, through whatever they can get their hands on, by making posters at home. These are simple yet effective ways of resting, but still being for the cause, still trying to resist the political violence in which cops enact on the society or community in your surrounding area. Now the question is, what is political violence? What makes political violence good and what makes political violence bad? The police deliberately use violence to control or kill off anyone who seeks to dismantle this power structure, their power structure, the state, the government. Anyone already marginalized within it is affected by this power structure negatively, but the cops don't care about that. They only care about ensuring that the government can stay in power. They are foot soldiers. We don't want a friendlier police force. We want to get out of control. We want a world without cops. This is a popular quote from the anarchist leaflet John T. Williams was murdered by Seattle cop Ian Burke. Violence from the oppressors is action and aggressive. It's directly affecting people without provocation, while violence from the oppressed is reactionary and self-defense. This is why misogyny and misandry is not the same thing. Misandry is a reaction to a misogynistic world. Misogyny is the oppression of women. This is not the same thing. Hence why some violence is acceptable while others is not. Manning Marble wrote in his book, How Capitalism Underdeveloped Black America. On March 16, 1981, police in Roseville, Michigan pursued 3 young black men driving what the officers mistakenly believed to be a stolen automobile. After a high-speed chase, police officers Rafael Perez and Thomas Lavender pursued one of the black men, 20-year-old Theo Roddick Johnson. Both policemen fired, killing Johnson. According to a witness who saw the shooting, one of the policemen bragged to the other, "I blew that nigger's head off." This type of rhetoric is common in police officers because the line of work dehumanizes the people who they deem as criminals. The stages of counter-resistance are going like this. 1. The alarm reaction. This happens before resistance takes place, when people start realizing that something's not right. The society we live in is cooked. We don't know what to do. We need to do something. Otherwise, we won't make it, and other people will. 2. The stage of action. Resistance by various means, but if the action works, this is the final stage. Though, if it is not, the 3rd stage happens. This is the stage of exhaustion. If failure in step 2 is observed, then rest and recovery is needed, hence the creation of ways to rest while preparing for the next action. But this stage of exhaustion is when people start leaving the cause or start conforming to what society wants them to be. It's the phase where people give up. Struggle is not easy. Rest is necessary, but it must be done right in order to be seen as resistance. If you're in stage 3, feeling despondent at the world we live in currently, not knowing what to do, and wanting a better world for the people around you, and so you think that if I work within the system, eventually it'll change. The truth is, it never will change in that fashion. The stage of exhaustion is a weeding out of people who are not willing to struggle, who are not willing to act in resistance to what is wrong. But that leads me to stage 4, the stage of rest, which leads back to stage 2. Once rest has happened, stage 2 can happen at a higher rate, at a stronger rate, at a rate that is more combined, more coherent, more congruent. The stage of action is solidified. It is refined by the stage of rest. The question is how you choose to rest, which is why from the Bronx to the slums of Brazil to even in London or Washington, D.C., punk, breakdancing, and martial arts are all forms of rest and resistance, which is why I like to say there's a distinct connection between all 3. But anyone who seems to disagree can let me know in the comment section, and if you agree and want to put in your own ideas, you can let me know too. Thank you for listening to the video, and remember, all power to all people.